Hi, and welcome back to the Motherdrive. This is episode 17, tapping into your supermom and her supportive tools. So, what do those supportive tools look like? Well, we're about to find out. I am Katie Matthews. I'm your host, and I do this podcast from my car because, well, that's where I spend a lot of time, as I'm sure you can connect with if you're a mom out there. Today, our special guest is Jill Wright. Jill is a fellow Canadian. I don't know if you guys know, but I'm a Canadian originally, so it's always nice when I can find another Canadian to connect with on the podcast. And Jill is dedicated to empowering mothers to battle burnout and create a life that they love. I love this, by the way. Combining time management strategies with self-care tools and spiritual guidance, she helps moms manage their lives without feeling overwhelmed. And she is also a celebrated author, podcast host, and award-winning professional speaker and coach. Well, that is all super amazing, Jill, and we feel super grateful to have you on the show today. So I'm just going to jump right in and say, which is, can you share a little bit about your journey and what inspired you to focus on helping moms with self-care and time management?
Yeah, well, first, hey, I'm so happy to be here with you,
Yes.
Katie. This is fantastic. I love talking to moms, and yeah, I mean, my journey started when I became a mom. My first child was pretty like not easy, but once I had my second, things kind of like the roof blew off the house kind of deal, as many of us can attest to if you've got more than one. And I kind of I kind of went through this period when I was just coming off of maternity leave for my second child. And as we were talking about, we get that year in Canada. And I decided I didn't want to go back to my corporate job. I worked in hospitality. I was commuting downtown, like 45 minutes each way every day with weird hours. And I thought, nah, I've got two babies now. I'm going to make sure that my lifestyle allows me to spend the time I want with them, and I don't want to be frazzled. I get easily frazzled. So I try to do as much as I can to mitigate. So I decided I was going to open a consignment store for ladies' clothing in my little town. And it was down the street and it was perfect. And I had a friend who had the same model actually out east in Bathurst. And so I had a plan and I was excited about it. I went to business school and I always wanted to be like a business owner, very entrepreneurial. And so it was like, yes. But this was December 2019. And so by the time the store front opened, it was April 2020. And as we know, like retail did not do so well for that period
Yep.
of time during the pandemic, right? So I kind of found myself struggling to make it work, but also really bad postpartum depression and anxiety and OCD, like all combined. And then my 3-year-old at the time was just diagnosed with autism. So there was like a whole bunch of
Oh, that's
stuff. Yeah. And so I was drowning, but so many of my friends around me were like, oh, you're like super mom. How do you do this all? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm not doing this all. I'm not sure why it looks like I am, but like, let's talk about this because I'm drowning. Obviously, you're drowning. Everyone's having a hard time. And so it made me want to open this conversation up a little bit more so that we're openly talking about the struggles. But really, for me, what made me go into business helping moms is the fact that I couldn't change my external circumstances. They were so much out of my control at that time, but I didn't want to give it up. I was like, no, I want to be a business owner and I want to be a great mom. Like, I want to do both. How do I make this happen? So I dove into personal development, growth, productivity, habits, all of that type of stuff. And I realized that the tools I was learning, though really valuable, didn't work for me as a working mom. Like a morning routine was impossible when your kids wake up at 5:30. I'm like, no, I see the value here, but like, let's tweak it. And so the podcast Grow Like a Mother started basically with me just sharing the tweaks I was making on this personal development stuff in an effort to keep it together as a working mom and kind of snowballed from there.
It's amazing. I love that it was so organic, like, and that you just shared essentially just what you were going through. And that authenticity is so important. And the journey, like being transparent with other moms, because I really feel like so many moms are struggling and really just wearing a mask every day that like, hey, I'm just struggling to like get it together here, and I'm having to act like I know exactly what I'm doing and that everything is fluid for me. And I just, and it's not. It's not. And a lot of people are falling apart behind closed doors and never ever, using each other as the scaffolding that we are meant to use each other for. Like, where is the village? I, by the way, love that you have the village on your website, like that community, because all I kept saying 11 years ago when I had my son was, where's the village that everyone is talking about? Because I had this baby in downtown New York, and there was no one. It was just me and him. And then my husband was an attorney, so he was very busy with work, and it was just me and the baby trying to figure it out together. And you feel very isolated, and you know, there's they a lot of people don't talk about that piece of the journey, and that, hey, like, postpartum can happen. It's really normal and more common than you would imagine. And also, most people don't even know when they're going through it. They're like something's off, not sure what, and that quiz that they gave me at the doctor's office wasn't really nailing it, you
Yeah.
know. You know what I mean? So it was just like, I really connected when I saw that village. I was like, oh my God. Yeah,
It's my favorite place.
really. Yeah. So
Yeah.
important. So important. The village is like, and now after I had my daughter years later, um, my husband is way more available because, he's senior in his career and he runs his own business now, and et cetera, et cetera. But also, like, I have tons of friends that have kids. And back then we had kids like in our late 20s. So it was just me, and everybody else was like partying at the bar and doing all the things that, like, late 20-year-olds do. So it was just I wish I had had that mom village at that point. And so I'm so glad that you really lean into that, and people can see, hey, that exists. You can come here for it. We can create it
Yeah.
together. So I love it for you.
Exactly.
Okay, so I did notice that you talk a lot about Supermom and the different kinds of Supermoms. So I'm curious as to, like, what define your different types of like Supermoms that you work with, and can you give me an example of a framework that might like support a specific Supermom? Because I found this
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah. I love that we get to talk about this. What I was, so back in that time where I was learning habits, productivity, time management, I was learning so many tools and they didn't all work for me, but I saw the value of like, okay, I could see how this could work for someone in a different circumstance or who has a different, amount of energy or different support or different personality type. And so what I did was I just kind of kept all these tools in the background even if they didn't work for me, because I knew that they'd be available for someone else. And so just in the past, I would say 18 months, I've sort of um, classified all of these tools into four different buckets because the thing that's missing when we're talking about time management, I'm going to bring it back to Supermoms, I promise. But the thing that's missing when we're talking about time management is that we need to personalize it. I can throw at you 300 things, but it's going to be like three or four that are really going to work for your personality, your circumstances, the support you have, all these different things. And so I created these four archetypes of super moms in an effort to sort of help me in my coaching narrow down the tools that I can use when I'm working one-on-one with people to really drill down and say, okay, cut the crap. We don't need this like cookie cutter narrative. Let's figure out what's going to work for you. And I'll give you the tools to start a toolbox and we can go from there. And so I created a quiz. It's on the website, the Supermom quiz. It's like 7 or 8 questions, super fun. You find out your Supermom type. And then from there, the different tools that are going to work specifically for you. So we've got the team player Supermom, who is someone who loves being in community. They're not necessarily the leader. They like to know everyone else's opinions first before they make decisions. They do a lot of research on things. They can be a little bit slow to pull the trigger, but they're very methodical, and they really want to make sure that they're inclusive with everybody in the group, right? We've got what I call the multifaceted mama. So she's kind of like that squirrel brain. She can multitask. Most people, I would say, multitasking is not the way, but for her, it works really well. She wants to try everything. She gets FOMO. She wants to be all places at all times. She's got a lot of interest, but it can be challenging for her to like keep a schedule. We've got the selfless giver type of super mom who is kind of like a martyr almost. She gets stuck with saying yes to everybody, doesn't really have great boundaries, just cares so much and wants to give and give and give, and she forgets about herself. So like self-care is a big thing for that type. And then the last one is what I call the high achiever. So this is like almost a workaholic type of super mom, right? Like finds it difficult to blur the lines between work and home. You're kind of like always in both modes at the same time, which triggers a lot of mom guilt. And by the way, I've been all of these four types at some point, and I'm like, sometimes at work, I'm the team player, but at home, I'm the selfless giver. So there's a lot of flow, which gives us flexibility in building these toolboxes. But in terms of framework on like, what do we do with this information? I really like to walk through. I've got like a 4-part framework that I walk people through when I do the one-to-one sessions. And it's like, okay, what is your supermom type? Because I'm going to give you a whole bunch of time management tools. But first, we want to also look at how we do your self-care. I take them through, one of the pieces is a weekly planning framework that I sort of curated that works super duper well for all of these types, actually, to give some flexibility in your week, but also to be hyper focused on what you need to achieve. And we block out time for self-care each week in a really unique way. And you show up and use your intuition to feel into what you really need during that time period, and I could talk forever just even about that. And then I talk about rest. I talk about, if you know your human design, which is kind of like an astrology, it's like based on your birthplace, right? It's
I'm
just different
curious, what are
framework.
you? What's
I'm
your
a
human design?
manifester.
Ah, yeah, that would make sense. I'm a
Yeah.
reflector.
Are you? Oh, that's cool. You're the second
Yeah.
reflector I've talked to in the last couple of days. You guys are
Oh,
like super
wow.
unicorns. That's
Yeah,
cool.
people say that every time I tell them my human design sign, they're like, "Oh, you guys are not around a lot."
No, but how perfect for you to be doing a podcast.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Cool.
It's great. It's
Yeah.
yeah, thriving.
Yeah. What was I saying about human design? Oh, yeah. So based on your human design type, there are different types of rests that work really well for each type,
Yeah.
because the rest for you is not going to be the same type of rest that I need. And so I use that framework to help people understand how they can use rest like as a productivity tool almost. So it's
Hmm.
like it's the time management tools, it's the weekly planning, it's the self-care, and it's the rest. And we bring that all together with other things like boundaries and all of these different
Yeah.
pieces to really get a handle on like, oh, I can do this. This is my personal way. And
Yeah.
when you have that, it just feels really doable. And you get the momentum and you're not spinning like I'm a research hound, like I'll find out everything I can, but then I can't decide which one is going to be best for me. And I get stuck. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are like that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are like that for sure. Like I have all of the options. Uh-oh. Then the uh-oh
Right.
sets in. Like, well, now what do I do? Which one is the right? How do I know what's right for me? Right. And sometimes I think that's why what you're doing is really great because you can almost like help people guide themselves towards the answers of like what makes sense for them based on like what you're hearing. Because you're the objective party that can be like, I think you might want to lean a little bit more into this one because, and then they're like, oh yeah, that's right. That makes sense.
Right. And like
It's
permission
sort
not to do it all.
yeah, and the fresh like insights that you would offer to like just the game of motherhood, which is like there's so many rules and so many things that you feel like are superimposed on you, and you have to be able to just be like, yeah, I'm not going to follow that rule. These are the rules that I'm breaking over here. But it feels like, and I don't mean that there are rules, but it feels like sometimes there's so many rules that society sort of like pressures things, and you're like, no, that doesn't feel right. I'm not going to use that, you know?
Yeah.
So, what would you say are the practical tips for moms that can to make space for like their dreams and their personal goals amidst their like daily responsibilities?
The first thing you have to do is like find the space to get quiet. And I always say that's not really about like managing your time. It's about managing your energy and your space. Because the goal, of course, isn't like just to get more time. The goal is to do something with that time, to create space to live the life that you actually want and feel like, oh, okay, I'm enjoying this instead of just like getting through it. And so I say it always starts with finding that like connection to that soul piece, to that inner piece, to like who you are beneath it all without all of the titles for all of the roles that you do, because we all have a million roles we play. But who are you inside that? And starting there to reconnect. But to do that, you have to get quiet, which is hard for moms because we're always helping someone, we're always in like noise. So one of the things that I encourage people to do to get started with this is like, if you need to, put yourself in a closet, like with a timer for 2 minutes, if that's all you can take. Like, be intentional with the time that you're in the shower by yourself and just start to be aware of these periods where you can take some time where you're by yourself and just listen to what your body needs. Listen to the thoughts that are coming in. Because if you can start, it's like a muscle. If you practice getting quiet with yourself and tuning in and listening, you're going to get more information coming through, right? I always say your intuition is like the truth, and the truth doesn't
Mm-hmm.
need to yell. It doesn't need to get your attention. It knows, it trusts in itself. But all of the other
Sometimes it's a
noise,
whisper also, and so it's really hard to hear, which is I
yes,
love that piece about getting quiet because that voice can be so quiet.
it's like,
Like
I'm here if you want me. You have to
yeah.
really look for it and claim it. And once you get in the practice of doing that, then you can get clear on like, okay, what do I actually want life to look like? And do I feel good with what my calendar is right now? And am I putting my time, effort, energy, money into the places that I want to? Is there things I can change? Like you can start to ask these questions and get curious, and that catapults everything else.
Yeah, I think it's finding we go into this auto program like every day, this like routine that we have sometimes set up for ourselves. And if we're not getting quiet with that routine, then like you said, these questions are so critical to ask yourself for any type of growth or development or change or figuring out how you really want to live. You can't do that unless you ask the questions. So I think a lot of people are don't ask the questions because they're so busy with the day to day and they realize something's off, and that's probably when they land with you.
Yeah.
Um, I'm I'm curious about this. What is like a like a can you think about a time when you had a client and she um finally found the time to get quiet and finally figured out what her dream was? Can you talk about like what that would have been like for her to find the dream and then maybe to actually like live that dream, and how magical that, like, what was her experience with that, and what was your experience with like guiding her through that?
I love this question. It's not often that we get to focus on like the client in an interview, which is really what it's all about. So thank you for opening that space. Um, I'll share with you a story about one of my clients. She lives in Austria and she's a
Mm-hmm.
vet. She's an osteopathic vet. And so she's piecing together, she's got like I think about a 3-year-old daughter, and
Mm-hmm.
she's trying to work as a vet in a private practice, but also open up sort of, she's a medium as well. So she does like animal communicating for animals that have passed on. So she's trying to do that piece and her private practice. And she's a couple days a week also at um, a group facility, right? So she's got all
Mm-hmm.
these different pieces of her job. And she was feeling like things were moving too quickly for her, right? And she was like, I just don't know how to slow down. I feel like I need extra time in the morning. I feel like I want to just savor these moments with my daughter in the evening, but my life is so jam-packed. I want to she had a commitment to a friend to go help with some horses in the countryside every week, and she wasn't making it there, and she felt really guilty about that. And that was a piece that really filled her up in her life. And so we went through the session. We did a couple sessions together, and she was able to reframe the way that she looked at this commitment to the horses, bring her daughter with her, include her in that. So she was able to get like the time with her daughter, the time with the horses, the time helping her friend. I mean, in addition to the way that we restructured how she looks at her workday, but that piece with the self-care and bringing that component back into her life changed so much for her in terms of just refilling up without having, she didn't go every week, and she took the pressure off herself to be perfect at it. But we were able to combine so many pieces together. And after that, she said, oh, I'm looking at everything a little differently. She was able to take a vacation for the first time, like as a family with her husband and her daughter. And they got to reconnect with each other. And she wasn't feeling guilty about work when she was gone. Like the way that she transformed everything was so beautiful and self-initiated. She was able to identify the pieces that were like important to her to change. And that's really important that the client leads it with some like ideas and poking around in her brain from me. But like I can suggest a bunch of things, but unless they feel meaningful for you, it's not going to make an impact in your life. And the really interesting thing that Vanessa told me after working together, because she's a healer and she's an energy worker, which I mean, if you're into the woo, you'll get it. And I am into the woo, but she's like, Jill, the thing that made the difference for me working with you wasn't the tools. They were great. She goes, they were fantastic. But the thing that made the difference, like the medicine, is your energy and how you showed up and what you like, the whole experience, which felt really cool. So now I go into it in a little bit of a different way, knowing that, oh, okay, like there's lots of people who help moms. Obviously, there are a lot of moms who need help, but to be able to show up knowing that like the experience and the support that I'm offering is really felt by the clients and makes the difference, that's super cool.
Yeah, that's really amazing that she gifted you with that like knowledge to be like, hey, this energy is so impactful and I just need you to know that, because it actually transforms the way you approach everyone else. It like
100%.
shifts, even if you do always approach with a certain energy, it also like inspires even more of that energy to come through, which I love, and I love a little woo. It's
Yeah.
great. Um so one of the things that I have noticed in moms is when they have a child, or multiple children, they will often, everyone, I feel like, I don't think I've ever encountered someone who hasn't felt lost post mother becoming a mom. And in those moments, there's always this like, usually, I will say, this like, who am I now moment. And also just like at some point in the beginning, you try to like run back to who you were, and you're like, I need to try to get that like body back, or I need to try to get my mind back where it was, or like my approach to work, or my approach to my like my partner. And there's all this like trying to run back to who you were before you became a mom. And I'm just, so there's this like new you that you kind of have to try to find and work, toward developing a relationship with. And I'm curious as to, well, one of the things I've noticed is like the loss of like confidence in
Mm.
yourself, kind of, right? Because you're like, well, okay, I was really confident in who I was before. Maybe you weren't, but you felt like, okay, I know this person. I've lived with her my whole life, right? But then you become a mom and you're like, okay, I don't know who this is anymore. And also I have no confidence in this because like I'm doing it for the first time. And also there's this me and I'm in this new body and I'm doing work differently because I've got so many new responsibilities and there's a shift in my relationship. And so my confidence is kind of in the toilet a little bit and I'm struggling to find it. So what would you say to moms who are out there and they're just like, or maybe they're even 3 kids deep and they're like, I still haven't figured it out. I haven't found my confidence. What would you say to them about like taking some steps in the right direction to try to reclaim that confidence?
Such a great question. And you're right. I also haven't come across anyone who didn't experience that. I distinctly remember when I was, I don't know, maybe like, I realized pretty early that I was like upside down in the waves, had no idea what direction was what, who I was. And I, I tried to create a list of things that I loved, that were like my values,
Yeah.
my joys, my things. And I blanked and I knew right then I was in deep trouble because I couldn't identify with myself anymore. And I think that you nailed it when you said even 3 kids deep, like every time a baby's born, the mom is reborn, right? Like
Yeah, that's right.
everything changes. So what I tell moms is first off, like it's normal and you're not alone in this. Every single mom is also experiencing this transition and almost like a metamorphosis of
Yeah.
yourself as you go, right? And you're not
Yeah.
a different person, you're just a different version. So it's trying to figure out like what version are you now? I always sort of relate it to when I had, so when my son was first diagnosed with autism, like I got real good at dealing with a nonverbal toddler. Like I had all the tools, I knew it all. We were on point. Now he's going into grade 2 and he's like fully functioning and having a different set of issues that I'm not equipped for because I didn't realize that I had to come up and meet him here now. Somehow that the transition snuck by me and it was like, oh, okay, now I need to level up my tools to be able to navigate this current era. And and I think that's the same for moms, is realizing like, oh, we're just in a new space. Let's take a look around. Let's take an inventory of like, okay, what is true? What can I not change? What is true? What am I looking to feel like? Because it's not necessarily what it looks like around us. We can get caught up in like how we want our day to look, or how we want our home to look, or how we want our career to function. And it's more about how do I want to feel in this season? Like, do I want to feel balanced and rested, or do I want to feel adventurous and like passionate and fun, or how do I want to feel? And then you can chip away at creating life from that vantage point. But really important is I like to keep a note on my phone of the little things that bring me joy throughout the day. So
I
I
love
can
that.
just remember and tune in. Something I love talking about is time confetti. It's this idea of the little pockets throughout the day, the 5 or 10 minute pockets that we just don't tune into, but can be really valuable. And so I have a time confetti list on my phone, and every time I'm like 5 minutes early for pickup, or I'm waiting on hold calling the doctor's office or something, I just flip the list open and I'm like, okay, what can I do for me? Like, what would make me feel fuller? Because we don't always get that self-care hour, as much as we want it. It doesn't have to be an hour. You can fill your cup up throughout the day if we're being intentional about finding these little pockets. And I really like for people to start there with a list that's tangible, because when you're in fight or flight mode, like when you're in that chaos, you literally can't access a part of your brain that gives you resources. It's like the whole reason I wrote my book is because I wanted everything to be available to me when I was in like panic mode and I wanted my tools. But you can't, your brain is like, no, you can't access this. We're only going to give you like what you need to survive right now. And so to have something physical to refer to bring you back in those moments of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know who I am. I'm feeling panicked. It's a really valuable tool.
I'm sure that you probably, so you have moms that you're using this tool with, but I'm sure that it's like so transferable to the rest of your life with like your children, because if they're having a moment, they're unreachable there while they're having that. Like, unless they have something that they have developed in off out of control mode, right? Like you said, your pamphlet, your book is your thing, right? Like, okay, if I'm feeling out of control, I go back to my book and I know it's a reference point, right? But also it's a reference point clearly for so many other mothers to look at and go, hey, I've got my go-to thing, right? But with your kids, if you could also develop a very similar, sort of skill set with them, and then be able to reach them in that moment, it works. Like it's a synergy between mom and child as well. So I love that you have this resource for moms, but also that they can like take this and use this with their kids in many ways. So like I feel like it's just like a twofold sort of thing that that moms can use. I
Well,
love that.
much of the reason that this work is so valuable, and when moms finally decide to take that step to commit to invest in themselves, is because they realize the ripple effect is going to help their kids. It's really hard for
Mm-hmm.
moms to step into spending time, money, or energy on themselves just for the
Yep.
sake of themselves. But when we look at it from this place of, oh, when I do the work, my kids see it, I have tools to help them, they can go out into their lives, they have these resources and this knowledge way earlier in life than I did, they can avoid in their 30s and 40s trying to do this struggle. Like when we look at it from that perspective, they get it and they're like, oh, I need to do this for me and for them, right?
Yeah.
So many of these tools are for the
100%.
kids. Yeah.
It really is. And like you said, I've seen that so many times. All of my guests that have been moms have always just been like, it's so hard to just prioritize yourself. But when you realize that the prioritization of yourself is so impactful for your kids and the rest of your family unit in general and the world, it's like you are uplifting the collective if you just work on yourself. Yes, that's it. Do what you need to do, right? Um, okay, so what is your biggest piece of advice, your favorite piece of advice, um, to a mom out there that is struggling to figure out her purpose?
Trust yourself. There is so much information, especially now as we're talking about, like, everyone has a theory, everyone has a process, everyone has a book, a podcast, a YouTube channel to give advice on the same topic. Like
Mm-hmm.
parenting is a really good example. You can have, you know, 300 different parenting experts giving you advice, but they're not in your home. They don't know your
Mm-hmm.
kid,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for anything, I always say trust yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Develop that relationship with that inner part of you. Take that space, take that time, do that practice so that you can trust that you're making the right decision, that with the information that you have in the moment. And trust yourself if you get it wrong, that you can just change your mind.
I love that. I love that because we don't give ourselves permission to change our mind. It's just like, oh, you failed. No, you didn't. The gift was there. And you had a moment where you discovered something that just didn't work. And that's
Right.
it. You have the room to like reevaluate, right?
You know, I really love
And
this idea of looking at your life as a piece of art. And most people
mm-hmm.
would have a canvas and keep adding to it and keep adding to it to make the most beautiful whatever that they can. But
Mm-hmm.
what if we looked at it like a piece of wood or clay and we sculpted away and we were able to take things off and make the bad decisions and make the mistakes, and it still turns into this beautiful piece of art, but because we were taking things away instead of adding things on.
That is such a beautiful analogy. I love it. I love that. I love that visual. So yeah, I had one other additional question, and that is what is your biggest takeaway from your own personal mom journey that like I guess was the piece of your journey where you were like, okay, this is it, and I have to share this with everyone because it's made such an impact on me.
It's a great
Just
question.
just one thing. Like if you had all your clients and you could only tell them one thing, what would it be? Besides like trust yourself or like finding your, for when we're talking about finding your purpose, but like what else?
Ask for help.
Oh yes, that is so. I love it. I love it. I
Everything
love that you
changed for
said
me
that.
when I started asking for help.
Yeah, I love that. What a perfect place to close. Ask for help. So critical. just give yourself the permission to ask for help. Amazing. Thank you so much, Jill, for your time. This has been absolutely wonderful. I love your energy. It is absolutely true what your client said. You have such a great energy. I can see how you inspire so many shifts for people. So if people want to reach you, where can they find you on Instagram or, any of the platforms that and also your book?
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Tell me.
It's been a gift to chat with you. I love sharing and I love what you're doing with your podcast. You're inspiring so many moms. So thank you for the work that you are doing. The best place to connect with me probably is just my website. It's jillwright.ca because I'm
Mm-hmm.
Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
But on Instagram, I'm grow like a mother. So if you're on there, shoot me a message and let
Yes.
Katie and I know that you heard me here on her podcast. And yeah, for anyone who's listening and is interested, I would love to offer them a free copy of my book. They can just reach out to me and I'll send it to them in the mail
That is
and start to
incredible.
spread the love.
So good.
Yeah.
Okay, I will put all of your info in the show notes anyways. So, but I just wanted you to be able to do that shout out just directly from you. So thank you so much again for your time, Jill. And it has been truly a pleasure.